have to do with the electricity in our homes?
So we use the gas primarily in Ghana to power the electricity system. So a lot of our generation systems are now hooked onto gas. So that's the primary fuel for Ghana now. And because of the cash situation in the power sector, even though some of the plants are dual fuel plants, we don't readily always have reserves around, so that when the gas cuts, you would want to switch to an alternative fuel. So that challenge exists. But primarily, gas is what we're using to power most of our plants at this point. So if you don't have enough coming from the fields, then that constrains the amount of power you can actually generate. That means you need to have liquid fuel on standby to be able to switch. And if we don't have the money to buy a reserve, then it becomes inevitable that some load will have to be shared.
Yeah, you stepped into my next question because we know that most of our plants are dual fuel plants, which means that if we are not running on gas, we can't go to liquid fuel, which is often heavy fuel oil. But we know that gas does not only come from the Jubilee field or the 10 field, right? We are also getting gas from the West African Gas Pipeline or WAPCO, which is that company there. So isn't that supposed to supplement the supply we get at a time like this?
So we have a supply volume from WAPCO. We have, I think, about 60 million standard cubic feet of gas standby letters of credit. We used to have an arrangement where gas was supplied from Nigeria, and then we pay as we consume. But because we're not paying for the gas, the Nigerians then said they're not going to give us the gas on credit. So we have to now pay before we use. So we raise LCs, and then we pay. So the LC, the standby LC that we have now, is up to 60 million standard cubic feet, and that is what they can supply. So because of the LCs now, we're paying what is coming from Nigeria. If you want more volumes, you have to, up the LC to be able to get more volume. That is also not to say that, that supply has been consistent. It also has its own challenges. Sometimes you need it, it wouldn't come. So gas supply challenges are there. We need to fix it. But you made an important point. The reason why we have invested in dual fuel plants is to be able to offset some of these challenges so that when you don't have gas, you can switch to crude oil to do that. Importantly, the money has been spent, and whether we use the tanks or not, it is part of the bill that we have to pay. So we need to make that conscious effort to ensure that at all times we have that fuel that can switch. That may require recalibrating the tariff because it's the tariff that has to accommodate all of these dynamics. If we want to have fuel on standby, how do we do that? And the regulator becomes very important in this conversation. Can we say that we put in maybe a cent on the bill to be able to store liquid fuel? Therefore, when we do not have gas, we could switch to it? Or can we calibrate the tariff to oscillate or to adjust depending on which fuel we're using at what time? And I think that makes it much more reasonable for us to have a consistent supply of power. Because if you're switching from gas to liquid and there is a margin, somebody has to pay for it. It cannot be free. So then that is a conversation we really need to have at this point.
Okay, Mr. Boakye, there are three key things you have mentioned that I want us to go back to and explain further for the sake of my listeners. Okay, so the first thing you said is that there were standby LCs with WAPCO, which covered only a certain amount of gas, so that if we want to get more gas from WAPCO, that means we may have to up that LC. What is an LC?
Letters of credit. So the bank, it's a bank guarantee. If you don't pay, then they go and take it from the bank.
And will that require a payment of money to the bank? With us, for instance, having money at the bank, so that if we don't pay, they go and draw from that account?
Yeah, so the bank guarantees that if you do not pay, they will pay. So you need to have that arrangement with the bank. So if you don't pay and the bank pays, you pay charges to the bank and also the value that has been drawn down by WAPCO. Yes, exactly.
With that explanation, can I then say that we have ruled out getting an extra amount of gas from WAPCO because of money?
It's partly so. I mean, that is the volume you have signed up to now. That VRA says that's what they can take and pay.
So it's a money problem.
They want more. It's a money problem.
It's a money problem.
Those will account essentially for how much we also have, because you have to create that balance. If you're producing from your own fields, there is so much you can take from Nigeria also. So there's that balance. But if your field is not working, how do you calibrate to ask for more from Nigeria, for example? And that will require you topping up your LCs. And I don't know whether there's that fluid mechanism built into that arrangement to allow them to push more gas when needed.
Okay.
And the LC allows that to happen.
Okay. You stepped into the two other issues I wanted clarification on. So you talked about recalibrating the tariff, and then you talked about putting a cent on the tariff. My question is, are we saying that we have to charge more for electricity if we want to guarantee that we'll get a stable supply of power?
Not necessarily. The point is that we have to pay the true cost of the tariff. Today, oil is even cheap. It's far cheaper than gas as we speak. You understand? So it's just about making sure that at any point, what we are putting into the sector can be recovered, right? And having that arrangement in place is what I'm saying. So if you're buying liquid and at that point it is more expensive, the tariff should account for it. If you're buying gas and the gas is expensive, the tariff should account for it. And that is how every efficient system is run. Nobody pays for electricity, the consumer pays. So we have to make it cost reflective, and the regulator has to do that. You have to make sure that at all times we are recovering the cost, and that takes out takes the burden off the shoulders of government, really, to now every time have to come and pay for electricity that has been consumed. And also looking critically at the distribution end and ensuring that we are recovering the tariff. And when we recover the tariff, the chain is actually paid for it. We have generators, we have transmitters, and then we have the distributors. So if the distributor is the one collecting the revenue, what is the mechanism to ensure that when the distributors have collected the revenue, they are not holding on to the revenue? Because if you look at the tariff structure, there is a component that is supposed to go to the generator. There is a component that is supposed to go to the transmitter. So at what point does the distributor hold on to all the money and take what they have to take before they give anybody money? So, and that has been the challenge, and we've been struggling to fix that for so long. We keep talking about cash waterfall mechanism that ensure that everybody is paid along the chain.
Okay.
But primarily, if the regulator is working, I don't think we even need cash waterfall. If VRC has approved a tariff and says the VRA's tariff payment out of this tariff is X amount, Grico's share is X amount, I cannot imagine why ECG will collect the money and decide not to give a VRA's share.
But is that what is happening now, Mr. Boakye?
Yes, that's what is happening.
The case is that ECG is collecting revenue and they are not passing it down to the people they owe?
Yes, that's really.
How do we know
they
that?
Don't pass it on. Oh, but it's been a conversation for more than 7 years or so.
About how much are they collecting that they are not passing on as of now?
Oh, we don't know the volumes, but I think they will be collecting close to 200 million Ghana cedis a week.
I had wanted to know, because we know that there's a debt of about 3 billion on ECG's books, if you can corroborate that. And that means that there is money that they are owed. For a long time, the conversation has been around how ministries, departments, and agencies, which is basically government, owes ECG, and so they are not able to pay the people up the value chain. But what you're introducing now is that ECG may have the money to pay the people they owe, but when they collect it, they just don't pass the money on.
You see, we always keep talking about the debt, but nobody is unpacking it. We're not even giving us the data to unpack how this debt structure is actually coming about. But the reality is that every cent you collect, it has various, it's broken down by the regulator. We know how much VRA and the generators are supposed to get. So let's forget about the big numbers and how much anybody owes, and go down to the bottom and say that if you are able to collect 1 Ghana cedis, even at the end of the month, the generator is supposed to get X, the transmitter is supposed to get X, and then the distributor get X. So why? So that, I mean, we can now focus on how do we fix the outstanding debt or the accumulated debt. But we seem not to have a way around that, and we still we pay our tariff, we pay our bills. Okay. We use the electricity.
Okay. You're live on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM. Mr. Boache, just a moment. It's 24 minutes past 8. And Ben Boache has brought us to the point. He's Executive Director, of course, for Africa Center for Energy Policy, a leading energy think tank in the country. Now, Mr. Boache has brought us to a point where it seems that the reason why you don't have power in your home is a question of money. Mr. Boache believes that, first of all, the monies that ECG is charging you for power are not getting to the people that ECG owes, which may be a reason why we are not able to get stable supply of fuel to power the plants that produce the power for you at home. So here's the question. We know why we don't have power now, Mr. Boache. How long do you estimate it will continue, the current situation we are in?
I keep saying that the way the power sector is functioning now, nobody can give a definite end to our problems. Because, one, we need to make investment in the distribution sector. And that is what brought about the conversation about private sector participation and what PDS was supposed to do. And finally, that contract had to be cancelled. That investment is critical. One, if we are not investing in the distribution end, and you even have enough generation and you are generating enough electricity, that frequent trips within localities will continue to exist. And that is even more dangerous for us, because once the power is generated and you are not able to transmit, you are not able to send it to the user for us to use the electricity, it is lost. And that becomes another cost. So you cannot recover that electricity even though it was generated.
So it's difficult, Mr. Boache, to estimate how long we may have these challenges with power supply, as you mentioned them. But I want to quickly try and get an understanding of this issue now. The President has promised stable power supply. He says that he has impressed upon ECG and Water Company to make sure that we get power to our homes. But you, from what you are telling us, the facts within the sector may not necessarily help the President in his quest. Do you think realistically that we can get consistent power supply in spite of what has been said?
I think the President can do as much as he can. Even if you make money available today, you can address part of the problem. The bigger problem is that even the systems that are supposed to hold the electricity supply together, it doesn't exist. You have persistent and consistent challenges with the distribution system, power tripping, GRICOs who need to invest to ensure that they can keep their systems sound. So that would take time. Maybe at this point, some money can be provided to ensure that at least the generation systems are working, and we can only have power cuts if the local systems don't support it. But you cannot be definite that we are out of the woods, or you're not going to have any localized fault or trip in your community, because that investment cannot be done overnight.
So that's a no for my question. We can't say that we will get that stable, consistent power supply given what we have now.
You would have to unpack what the President means, by ensuring that there's supply, consistent supply. Maybe he's talking about generation, and generation alone is not a fix for our problem. There are challenges at the distribution end, there are challenges at the transmission end, which you also have to be fixed.
Mr. Boache, just give me a moment, because I want us to get the specifics of what the President said. And I'm craving your indulgence that you take a listen to this for me.
Sure.
Ghana Water Company Limited and the Electricity Company of Ghana have been directed to ensure the stable supply of water and electricity during this period.
Mr. Boache, is this possible?
I don't know. It's possible if the systems are not failing. For any reason, if we don't have trips and there is enough generation, you could have it. But I wouldn't promise that because the systems are tripping. Mostly you have power going out for an hour, 2 hours because of local situation. And those ones, I'm not sure we can control it almost immediately. We will continue to experience that. But the long term is the investment that is required to ensure that we have a sound system, which is good for all of us, because if the power is generated and we are not using it, we will come back to pay along the line, or government will have to raise the money to be able to pay for it.
So we can't ensure stable power supply?
Daniel, you want that from me? I'm not ECG or Gridco. I'm just trying to paint the reality that you need a sound system and not just promise.
Right. Ben Boatim, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
You're welcome.
He's Executive Director for the Africa Center for Energy Policy. And what we've done this morning is that we've walked from the ECG offices here in Accra. We've taken a stop at Atuabo, where we get our gas to power our generators. We've gone all the way to Nigeria, where we get gas from. And WAPCO has brought us all the way back to Accra. The story is that we have not paid the requisite money to make sure that we have enough fuel to power our plants, even if there's a challenge like what is happening at Jubilee. That aside, we may not have invested enough in the distribution sector, which is Electricity Company of Ghana, to make sure that we don't have the frequent number of trips we have. And so it will be very difficult to say that we can have stable electricity supply, stable, consistent electricity supply, as has been promised by the President over the weekend. It's 8:30 a.m. here on the Super Morning Show on Joy997 FM. I have been educated. I hope you have as well. You can send your messages and your comments on 0244 340 437, 0244 340 437. Now, speaking of money, when we come back, we'll get details on the Finance Minister's 1.2 billion Ghana cedi coronavirus alleviation program and government intervention for the vulnerable, the transportation arrangements for the frontline, and a lot more. This is one of the most key areas, one of the largest investments that we are going to make this year. Is about this 1.2 billion Ghana cedi coronavirus alleviation program. And we'll get details on that when we come back. Stay with us.
In a world where everything is changing around you, sometimes you need to turn to someone